our focus really is on highlighting the good and the benefit and the positive, and thinking about what we can have when we reimagine our cities. And I like to think a lot about children, for example. I have two kids. Like, what is a city like where you can send your kids out the front door and let them run to their friend's house and not worry about them getting hit by a car?
Welcome back to Cities in Motion. I'm Jacob. This is the podcast for anyone who wants cities built for people. Each week, we dig into the systems, design, and culture that shape urban life and explore how smarter transportation, better planning, and thoughtful policy can make our communities more livable.
Sara Lind has seen New York City streets from just about every angle, as a parent navigating them with a stroller, as a city council candidate knocking on doors, and as a co-executive director of Open Plans, a nonprofit dedicated to making those streets safer, more accessible, and less dominated by cars. We cover the state of protected bike infrastructure in New York, how congestion pricing is already reshaping Lower Manhattan, and what it looks like to give kids back the freedom to bike to school. Sara Lind, welcome to Cities in Motion.
Sara, thank you so much for joining me on Cities in Motion. Why don't you take 30 to 40 seconds to talk about Open Plans and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm Sara Lind. I'm co-executive director at Open Plans. We are a New York City-based nonprofit advocacy organization focused on making New York's streets and sidewalks and public spaces people-centered, deprioritizing the car, reprioritizing people. And we do that through advocacy, research, bold thinking about new ideas, grassroots organizing, all of the ways that we get change done.
Very nice. That sounds very exciting. Why don't I guess we start out with how do you make biking, non-driving activities, walking, biking, taking public transportation more accessible?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in New York, we're in a lucky and special position that we already have so much of that infrastructure in place. I know you're in Texas, and obviously that's different. But even here, we struggle with reclaiming space from cars. There's a real American mindset, I think, about how amazing cars are, and even in New York City, a lot of people cling to that. Our focus really is on highlighting the good and the benefit and the positive, and thinking about what we can have when we reimagine our cities. And, I like to think a lot about children, for example. I have two kids. Like, what is a city like where you can send your kids out the front door and let them run to their friend's house, and not worry about them getting hit by a car? So, again, trying to focus on the positive vision.
Yeah. My wife and I just had our first kid. He's turning about 9 weeks old on Thursday.
Tiny.
He's super chubby and cute.
Oh,
But my eyes are wide open now. Like, I don't feel comfortable pushing him across this road. I don't want to go that direction. This is an awesome space for him right now. Uh,
yeah.
so I was aware of it, but now I'm really aware of it as a dad and a parent.
I had a similar sort of.
Wait.
Yeah, I was pushing my child in the stroller and got the green light and started to cross, and a yellow cab took a really sharp left. And I mean, it was just a couple feet from just hitting us. And that was my awakening to the livable streets movement. So
So have you always lived in New York City?
I have not. I was born and raised in Wisconsin, and then I went to law school in Chicago and lived there for a while before moving here.
So since moving there, what changes have you noticed, witnessed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a huge boom in construction of bike lanes. And and also development of better bike infrastructure. So when I was on my local community board, sort of the local planning board, in 2019, I believe, we had a huge fight about a bike lane. And at the time, we said this should be a two-way bike lane, and it wasn't really the vision yet, and so we got a one-way bike lane. And now our Department of Transportation is putting in two-way bike lanes all over the place. So that development from like kind of the small, narrow one way to wider one way to here's some really wide two ways has been really neat to see. And I'm glad they're going down that path.
Yeah, we definitely have all sorts of variety of bike lanes. We have the sharrows, we have like the painted, basically gutters of the road.
Right.
But I have witnessed really great things happening here in Austin. I was listening to Melissa Bruntlit's book, and they were talking about how they worked with the Dutch Cycling Initiative. So anywhere you
Yeah.
see like the red cement, the adobe, that's the Dutch style stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of that in Austin, and it's growing. So if you were to talk to someone who's a first time biker in New York City, how would you introduce them? How would you encourage them to start biking?
Yeah. I grew up biking, and when I first moved to New York City, I was too scared to bike on these streets. So I didn't. I actually started during the pandemic because the roads were so much quieter, and felt so much safer. And then I was able to build confidence. Obviously, folks don't have that opportunity now. So I would advise starting, greenways in parks. You get the feel of biking in the city, but it's much safer. And then proceed to protected bike lanes. And now when I bike, I'm on any road, I'm taking the lane, I'm very confident, but that's not always people's comfort level. But I mean, fundamentally, it just, it goes to show the sort of lack of vision about our bike infrastructure. Because if I tell somebody bike in the greenways and bike on fully protected bike lanes, they're going to be like, well, I can't get where I need to go then. You know, so now I'm just biking around for fun. I can't get to, drop my kid off at school because there's not a full network. I can't get to work because there's a protected bike lane half the way and then there isn't one. So until we develop like full networks, it's hard for people to get comfortable biking enough so that they can go in a, less protected lane.
What else do you think needs to change, I guess, from person to person, local local politics? What needs to change there for us to go from here to a full biking network?
Yeah. I think we're experiencing a battle right now on the Upper West Side where DOT is trying to put in a bidirectional bike lane on West 72nd Street. This is not revolutionary, It seems pretty basic, but there's this small group of opponents that are just being extremely radical. They're planning to show up at, events where the DOT commissioner is to protest. And the way they talk, there's sort of a dehumanization of bikers. And there was a great piece in Streets Blog USA last week that talked about like, let's remember to look at each other as humans. You see a biker going by and you don't like the biker, but that's a mom, that's a worker, like that's, someone with their kid. So I think we have to remember that we're all sharing this space in the city and, we're all humans and we can find compromises and ways to share the road.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely. I've definitely experienced a lot more positive human moments biking than I have just sitting in my car in solitude. I mean, I
Totally.
drive all the time, but I try to bike as much as I can. Have you noticed a lot of difference since the congestion pricing went into effect?
Yeah. So our office is within the congestion pricing zone, the congestion relief zone, as we like to call it. And I mean, when it first went into effect, it was crazy. There were no cars. It was night and day. Definitely some of the traffic has come back, but it still is. I was actually thinking of it this morning as I crossed the street from the subway to my office that it used to be that when the light turned red and I was able to cross, there were cars backed up to the previous light. And this morning I went to cross and there were no cars. So it definitely is still much nicer. Yeah, it's lovely.
Hey, can you explain it a little bit for someone who is unfamiliar with congestion pricing?
Yeah. So it's used around the world. There's different forms of it. How we have it in New York is within a designated zone, you have to pay a fee to drive into the zone. So that's the congestion pricing fee. So it's similar to tolling. Everyone in America is familiar with toll roads. You drive on it, you pay a toll. So it's not, again, not earth shattering stuff. It's just that now, instead of when you're driving from one place to another, you pay a toll, it's that when you're driving into a specific area, you pay a toll. And so every single street that goes into the zone has, a camera system that imposes a fee when you drive in. it varies by time of day, it varies on the weekend, it varies by type of vehicle. So basically, the highest fee is about $9 overnight. I think it's something like 250. In a cab, it's lower because they pay, per trip. You don't have to pay if you're just within the zone. So if you happen to, for some reason, be driving from somewhere in Midtown Manhattan to somewhere else in Midtown Manhattan, which is odd, you wouldn't pay. And you don't pay when you leave the zone. So it's only when you're coming in.
Obviously, there's a lot of benefits: quieter streets, less congestion, it's safer for people to walk and bike around, and public transportation, I imagine, is a lot more efficient now. What are some of the opponents saying about
Mm.
congestion pricing? Like, what are they taught? I guess, yeah. What are they?
Yeah.
What are they?
I think the biggest sort of rallying cry is like, it's just another, government fee on poor, hardworking, New Yorkers who have to live in. And I have sympathy for truly low income people who are car dependent. And to alleviate that, there is a reduced fee for low income folks who have to come into the zone basically a certain number of times. But fundamentally in New York City, low income people are much more likely to use public transportation to get into Manhattan. And so the people driving in, we know, are overwhelmingly wealthier people. So it's a bad faith argument. And I think it's just people who don't want to have to pay. I mean, another thing that, some of the opponents would say is like, oh, this is going to decimate businesses. People aren't going to come to Soho anymore. People aren't going to go to Broadway shows. And that to me also is crazy because if you're paying, hundreds of dollars for your Broadway tickets, a couple $100, to take your family out to a dinner in the theater district, paying to park your car, I don't think the $9 toll is going to be the thing that makes you decide not to do it.
Yeah, and people who can afford it, how has that helped reach climate goals? Have you seen any sort of data that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen emissions go down. So the measurements within the congestion zone, emissions have gone down. I mean, it's just fact, right? There are fewer vehicles driving in. I think what we're kind of up against, though, is that even though with congestion pricing, car trips into and within the zone have gone down, in New York City broadly, driving is increasing every year. So even though our population isn't growing and even though we have great public transportation, people are driving more and more in the city as a whole. And so we're still seeing emissions go up overall. So, but open plans, our argument is we need a lot more of these kinds of interventions, not congestion pricing per se, but we have plans for low traffic neighborhoods. We've talked about low emission zones, different ways to help reduce driving to bring down emissions because right now on its own, it's not going to go down.
And that's vehicle miles traveled, correct?
Yes, sorry, yeah, vehicle miles traveled.
Okay, cool. I was looking up a little bit online before we started, and I saw that you ran for city council a couple years ago.
I did.
Can you tell me about a little bit of what you learned, your experience there, on why, and what you witnessed running for city council?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would encourage anyone who feels passionately about issues and feels like they could run for office to absolutely do it. It's hard, it's a slog, but it's worth it, especially young people in America today. I encourage young people to run for office. Yeah, I ran because I felt like there were issues in my neighborhood and in this city that weren't being addressed. And I wanted to bring them to the top of the conversation and, not let them sort of slide by anymore. Transportation issues being a core piece of the platform I ran on and, wanting more bike lanes, wanting to reduce driving, wanting to reclaim public space. Like I said, it's hard, but I learned so much about, community engagement. I learned about my community. I learned a lot about myself and, came out, still feeling passionate and excited about other ways to engage and, leading an advocacy organization is a great way to stay involved in that fight.
So, did open plans come before, during, after you ran?
After. Yeah.
Okay. Can you
Yeah.
tell me about the origins?
How I ended up at open plans?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually had kind of worked, I guess I had participated in open plans events before running for office, planning like local street activations, in the pre-COVID era when we didn't have an official open streets program, open plans and myself and some other stakeholders in the community would sometimes sort of close down streets to cars and throw little festivals and things. So after the election, I didn't win. I was looking for my next step and they had a job listing and I thought this would be an amazing place to work. So that's how I ended up here. Yeah.
Very cool. I also heard that May is National Bike Month. What are some ways y'all are celebrating National Bike Month?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things is bike buses. Yeah. Kids gather and bike to school together. I think it's so special. And, we think a lot about, as I said earlier, about kids and how they experience the city. And so that kind of like, how do we make it safe for kids to bike to school? Is really important to me. And one of the things we do at Open Plans is work on school streets. So this is where schools can close the street outside the school building. And so, for example, if you have a bike bus, they pull up to a school street and they have room to sort of unload and gather instead of being like stuck in this street and trying to, get off their bikes. And then, at pickup time with the street closed to cars, there's room for families to gather. And then during the day, they often use them for gym and recess and just kids to be able to get outside. So that kind of combination of like getting to school and enjoying space at school and being outside, I think is really special.
Um, yeah, I think bike buses are great. I've never witnessed one, but I have seen a ton of them online. I know there's a few here in Austin. I
Nice.
think it just builds a lot of great confidence and independence with kids
Yeah.
who should probably have that in their life right now. And I just sitting in a school drop off line in your car idling doesn't sound that great to me.
Yeah.
I mean, what have you talked to any parents? Have you talked to any children? What have they said about bike buses?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's just so special. And in addition to your comment about like, it's better than sitting in a car,
Yeah.
I think it's better than sitting on a phone, right? Like thinking about how we get kids to sort of engage in the world again. I have two teenagers and getting them off their phone is always a struggle. But I think having kids be active and especially on the way to school, having that like activity gets their brain in a good mindset for learning. There was no bike bus when my kids were younger and I was taking them to school. So I didn't get to participate in a bike bus, but I did bike my son to school on a cargo bike. And it was just like such a fun thing for us to do together every morning. Again, so much better than I mean, in New York, we wouldn't have driven, but we sometimes would take the bus and it's like, oh, the bus is late. Oh, the bus is crowded. And now it's like, oh, we're just on our bike and it's fresh air and lovely.
Yeah, I mean, I the bus is great, the train is great, but I really like riding my bike and getting there on my own and like, oh my gosh, I just replaced this trip with the bike instead of driving my
Mhm.
car. What kind of cargo bike do you have?
Yeah. I've sold it because my kid's cool now, but I had a turn. It
Oh,
was great.
nice.
Yeah,
Very cool.
it was great. I loved it.
I love to ask this question to a lot of my guests. What are some books that you have read recently that pertain to urbanism, bikeability, city planning,
Yeah.
advocacy, whatever?
Yeah. So I actually, in the middle of Michael Pollock's new book, I think it's Sidewalk Nation, Sidewalk
Okay.
something. Yeah. And loving it. So are you familiar with it?
I just listened to John Zimmerman's podcast
Okay.
about he was interviewing.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually had Michael come in to our office last week and chat with our staff. But I love the I love that he's written about this because I think sidewalks are a really under discussed part of our urban infrastructure. We talk a lot about bike lanes and bus lanes and repurposing car lanes and repurposing parking spaces, but sidewalks really hold it all together.
Yeah.
And in so many cities, and he talks a lot about this in the book, the city doesn't take care of the sidewalk at all. And so this like really fundamental place where even if literally the only thing you're doing is getting from your door to wherever your car is parked, you are still using the sidewalk. And so I think we really do need to reimagine how we care for them. So Yeah, I'm still in the middle of the book. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm loving it and would definitely recommend urbanists to take a look.
Cool. I did see your short video about New York City trash on the sidewalk.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know that.
crazy.
Just bags of piles, like taking up 2/3 of the sidewalk. Just
Yeah,
trash. I mean,
yeah. For
why is that? I know there's lots of people and they produce a lot of trash, but I guess the city hasn't thought of a more efficient, more aesthetic way to take care of it.
Yeah, I mean, so for people who haven't been to New York City,
Yeah.
we don't have alleys. And so a lot of cities handle their trash in the alley. We don't have them. So trash is collected on the sidewalk. And in very low density neighborhoods, we have, single family neighborhoods in New York City. That looks the way it often does in a single family neighborhood anywhere. You roll your garbage bin out. But in most of New York City, you have apartment buildings full of many units, and all that trash has to be put out. And we just put it out right now in bags on the sidewalk. And then the garbage truck eventually comes by and picks them up. And so you will have these huge mounds of garbage bags waiting to be picked up. And it's a huge hindrance, obviously, to pedestrians. It's gross. It doesn't make a very good walkable experience, but also it can be a real problem for people. When I had my kids in a stroller or people with a mobility device, it often kind of flows into the whole sidewalk. And then the other thing about it is I always say it's like we're laying out a feast for the rats. They just dig right into those plastic bags. But we are starting to work on containerizing our trash, like you see in some European cities, containerized trash. So making progress on that front.
Well, that's good.
Well, because you containerize your trash probably. Yeah, so our website is openplans.org. So you can learn about us there, and we have social media channels, and we have our events listed there. Definitely follow us on social media to keep in touch with our events, and we have a newsletter sign up. So we're always doing fun stuff. Last night we had a nerd night in Queens to talk about low traffic neighborhoods, and about 50 people showed up to just nerd out about a urbanism issue. So if you want to find those kind of folks, we're the place to be.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for taking the time. This is really great and informative. Thank you for what you do in making New York City more livable.
Thank you so much for having me.
Over the coming weeks, we will continue to explore the people and projects that are putting our cities in motion. You can follow Cities in Motion on Instagram for behind the scenes content and updates for the show. I'm Jacob, and thanks for listening. And we'll see you in the next episode. Don't forget to keep your cities in motion.